chief guest at College Day 98, the Honorable Mr. Justice Satyanarayana Prasad, Reverend Father Rector, Reverend Father Secretary, Reverend Father Principal, Deputy Principal, members of the faculty, students, parents, friends. I first wish to thank the college, especially the rector, the secretary, and the principal for this recognition. You feel a sense of satisfaction and happiness, but also humility when your alma mater, which, as was mentioned earlier, had a crucial role in shaping not just your career, but your values, when it recognizes the difference you might have made in the profession and also your contribution to society. I've studied in the succession of Christian institutions, starting with Rosary Matriculation Convent School to the Madras Christian College, where we had a charismatic and great headmaster, Kuruvilla Jacob, to Loyola College. And it has been a transforming experience. As has been mentioned, I was here between 1960 and 64, and I benefited from a rounded education. I played cricket for the college, also tennis. I captained the cricket team. I represented the university from here, but also I had the benefit of learning from some great teachers, among them Reverend Father Sequeira, Father Coyle. I didn't attend many classes from an outstanding scientist, Father Yadanapalli, who was a legend on the campus, a more gentle Jesuit leader you could not possibly meet. Father George, a left-handed tennis player, I remember. Father Guruvier from France, and several others, as well as lay professors and teachers like Professor Rajendran, Clarence, Professor Mota, and others as well. I don't want to go into all the names. The most important lessons in terms of values I learned here was values which are embedded in the Constitution, but still have to be renewed all the time, because if you don't take them seriously, they fade away. And among those values, as has been mentioned, the value of secularism, which is vital to our Constitution, part of its basic structure. Democracy, equality, treating everyone with respect, and above all, humility. It was impossible interacting with the Jesuits not to learn humility. Their distinctions were many in many fields, including science and the humanities, the liberal arts, in other leadership roles as well. But if you visited the Jesuit residence, it used to be called Father's Lodge in those days, the Jesuit residence, and see how they lived. Not only the discipline, but the humility. You could not, unless you were corrupt, unless you were spoilt, unless you had some ideas which don't belong here, you couldn't but be influenced by this gentle but powerful example. I went into journalism in the media field because I had a family connection with the newspaper. These days people make other choices, but at that time it was almost taken for granted that if you had any kind of interest and you went to a good education institution, if you went into that family business, particularly the media. The values I learnt applicable to journalism: truth-telling, freedom and independence, professional and social responsibility, working for the social good. Nobody can claim that you practice them all the time, but if you do it sincerely and with commitment, it is eminently possible to remain true to these values. The functions of journalism or the news media are the credible information function linked to the value of truth-telling, verification, being responsible, sober, being aware of what is good, what is the social good. Then there's a critical function, which is analytical, which can be investigative, which sometimes turns adversarial also, but all done professionally and with a sense of social responsibility. And derived from these central functions is an educational function. You seek to inform and educate without talking down to the audience, the readers, the viewers, the listeners, and so on. That's what it's all about, because there's a great deal to learn about politics, about the economy, about finance, about science and technology, about culture, the arts, sports, every field. And journalism cannot ever realize its full potential because there's so much more to learn. But nevertheless, you go about this task seriously. And derived from the central functions, the credible information function and the critical function, is journalism must serve as a forum for discussion and debate in a balanced way. You can be adversarial if something requires to be opposed, but not because you don't like somebody or this party or that. You have to be fair and just when you talk about this forum, opening this forum for discussion and debate. And then, if you do these well, you come to something called an agenda-building function or role. You don't set the agenda, but partnering with other institutions, for example, with this college, you can work to build a virtuous agenda, a worthwhile agenda, an agenda which is generally recognized to be for the social good. Although these days, in a highly polarized society and politics, it's not always easy to agree on what is virtuous, what is good, and so on. But I won't dwell on that on this happy occasion. It will be impossible to ignore the challenge posed by majoritarianism. I don't want to name names or go into particular details, but whether it is majoritarianism or particular entitlements claims on behalf of a small group, unless it is just, these have to be opposed. And what goes in the name of nationalism sometimes is really hyper-nationalism. It takes a religious color also. And it comes from various quarters, sometimes from those who claim to be minorities as well. But the major problem, as I see it as a journalist, I'd be dishonest if I didn't say this, is the challenge of majoritarianism, not just in India, but in many other countries, including the United States. And that's, I think, a big problem. You have to come to a college like this, an institution like this, to recognize the value of what is part of the preamble, what is the key, the core of the preamble to the Indian Constitution. And in this order: justice, equality, liberty, and fraternity. And it is fashionable today to decry secularism as a tired, formulaic, hack concept. And even some liberal journalists and intellectuals and other members of a supposedly liberal intelligentsia seem to have embraced this fashion. But secularism as a concept must be put to work all the time, and it consists, as I understand it, of two basic principles. You don't need to elaborate on it, but the first is that people belonging to all faiths and sections, male as well as female, are absolutely equal before the Constitution, before the law, and before public policy, or they are supposed to be. There shall be no discrimination against anyone on grounds of religion, race, caste, gender, and so on. This obviously is what the Constitution, in contrast to the Constitution of theocratic societies, I don't want to name them, but there are several, mandates through Articles 14, 15, 16, 17, 44, and 325, among others. The guarantees of the special rights of religious and linguistic minorities in Articles 29 and 30 are an extension, I believe, of this equality and fairness principle. The abolition of untouchability and the exceptions made to the non-discrimination rule to safeguard compensatory discrimination in favor of the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, and also the socially and educationally backward classes, as they are termed in the Constitution, are meant as devices to secure the integration of historically disadvantaged groups of people and their access to fair equality of opportunity. Secularism is thus the equality and fairness principle or doctrine, but it needs to be based on justice if it's to survive and flourish. Anything that denies this principle of secularism must be understood as being anti-constitutional. But the second principle of secularism is even more important in the present context. Although constitutionally and legally mandated, it is honored often in the breach. This principle is that religion shall not be inducted into politics, that religion shall not be exploited for political gain. The Constituent Assembly adopted a resolution in 1948 mandating this, and both the electoral and criminal laws have provisions in support of this principle. Moreover, on March 11, 1994, a 9-member bench of the Supreme Court of India full-throatedly upheld this principle in its judgment in what is known as the Bombay case. So I think that is a very important thing, and nowhere do you learn it in its nuances and its core than in Loyola College and institutions like Loyola College. But this is the outstanding institution in my experience. And there is another issue here. In his last speech to the Constituent Assembly, made on November 25, 1949, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, chairman of the drafting committee, brought out clearly and powerfully the importance of understanding the interdependence of the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity, and getting what he termed the union of Trinity right. He warned against internal threats to democracy and society, such as bhakti or hero worship in politics, to which Indians, as he understood it, were particularly addicted. It is quite possible, he mused, for this newborn democracy to retain its form, but to give place to dictatorship in fact. Equally important was Dr. Ambedkar's warning in the speech, please read it, against letting what he called the complete absence of two things in Indian society, that is equality, social and economic, and fraternity, to continue unchecked. If the contradiction, he said, between recognizing the principle of one man, one vote, and one vote, one value in politics, and denying the principle of one man, one value or equality in social and economic life, if this contradiction was not resolved, political democracy could not be expected to survive. How long shall we continue to deny equality in our social and economic life, he asked in this speech, addressing all the members of the constituency and, in a sense, all the people of India. If we continue to deny it for long, we will do so only by putting our political democracy in peril. And I think this was a somber reflection made on that happy occasion It was unexpected. As he himself noted, it might not have been very pleasant for some members of the Constituent Assembly to hear, but I'm afraid that political events, trends, and developments over the next several decades would demonstrate that Dr. Ambedkar on this issue got it absolutely right. I just want to touch on one point before I conclude. It's one of the important things I learned in this college was no use pursuing high standards or even excellence in the field of education unless you opened your gates and your doors wide to all sections of society. It's a very big challenge, not easy to do because there are so many factors that come in the way. But I remember that when the then Superior General of the Jesuit order, Father Colvenbach, came here, I believe, Father Rector reminded me it's in 1995. When he was here, I had the opportunity, the honor of being one of those who felicitated him. The message that came out on that occasion, when Father Colvenbach, the Jesuit, the Superior General of the Jesuit order, came to Loyola College in 1995 was, make a greater effort to provide access to not just the elite, not just the relatively privileged, but go out of your way to seek and help and provide access to the most discriminated against, non-privileged sections of society. And it is a matter of a great achievement that Loyola College has pursued this as a great cause. And I compliment the college, my institution, my alma mater, for really bringing about this change. Not that it didn't do it earlier, but with a greater focus and the greater concentration of resources to provide that. And that, I think, has become clear. It has done many other things in keeping with changes in modern society, in science and technology, in providing new kinds of services which we wouldn't have even thought of in the days when I was in the college. But this, I think, is perhaps its most important as it approaches its centenary. I look forward to being in the audience when the centenary celebration will be celebrated, will take place in 2025. And I thank the college and its leaders for doing me the honor, and I also convey my best regards to our Honorable Judge of the Madras High Court, who, as has been mentioned, like me, read history in this college before he went on to a distinguished career in law. Thank you very much.